The Peruvian Public Prosecutor's Office requested 18 months of preventive imprisonment for the former head of state, Pedro Castillo. In El Salvador, over 60,000 people have been detained in the context of the emergency regime imposed by Bukele's government to deal with alleged gang members. The European Parliament dismissed Greek socialist Eva Kaili as vice president of the chamber for her alleged involvement in a corruption scheme. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Now we begin with the news. The Peruvian Public Prosecutor's Office requested on Wednesday 18 months of preventive imprisonment for the former head of state, Pedro Castillo. The information was provided by a source close to the investigation against the former president for the alleged crime of rebellion. This request of the Public Prosecutor's Office sets legal procedures for Pedro Castillo to remain in prison after the initial period of preventive detention concluded this Wednesday. The court now has 48 hours to hold a hearing to decide whether to accept or reject the request from the prosecutor's office issued by the Supreme Prosecutor Uriel Terán of the Office of the Second Transit Supreme Prosecutor's Office, specialized in crimes committed by civil servants. Given the situation, Peru experiences its fifth consecutive day of protests amid repressive police action. Demonstrations demand the closure of Congress and the call for a constituted assembly. The Ombudsman's office officially stated that there are 6 deaths, pointing out that among the victims there are 2 minors, while local media reported that the number of deaths could be as high as 8. At the same time, agrarian unions and farmers joined by indigenous organizations began a national strike to demand the closing of the legislature and the calling for a constituted process. Meanwhile, rallies in the Peruvian department of Arequipa continue, demanding the release of Pedro Castillo and for a new constituted assembly. The Ministry of Defense announced on Tuesday a state of emergency in the region for 30 days, arguing the need to protect public and private property. At the same time, the region's merchants have joined the demonstrations and marched in Arequipa's main square. And at least 100 citizens took over by force the installations of the Camani gas compressor plant in the province of La Convención. The company also informed through a communique about the implementation of a contingency plan as a preventive measure in the face of the situation. The incident comes amidst the social pressure exerted by Peruvian citizens in response to the actions of the Congress and Dina Boluarte's government. Now we move on to other topics. In Colombia, this Tuesday, President Gustavo Petro approved the tax reform for equality and social justice, a historic debt with the most vulnerable. With this bill, the government plans to raise some $19.7 billion in 2023 and an average of $20 billion in the following 3 years. These resources will be destined for the most part to social investment, the fight against hunger and poverty, education, health, environmental protection, energy transition, and productive development. The government of Gustavo Petro also seeks with this measure the sustainability of public finances. Human rights organizations in Argentina held a press conference demanding respect for the rule of law in the country and expressed their support for Vice President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. The conference was held at the Museum Sitio de Memoria, formerly known as the Higher School of Mechanics for the Navy, which served as a torture and detention site during the 1976 to the 1983 military dictatorship in Argentina. Secretary of Human Rights Horacio Pietragaya Corti, as well as the mothers of Plaza de Mayo and other institutions, attended the meeting. During the event, activists denounced the politicization of justice, as well as the violation of rights in the nation. Given the situation, they advocated for popular mobilizations to reverse this reality. At least 60,000 people in El Salvador have been detained during the last months under the emergency regime imposed by the Bukele government to deal with alleged gang members, a plan questioned by various organizations that have denounced human rights violations. Local authorities reported that more than 400 alleged gang members were among those detained after the army surrounded the city of Soyapango on December the 3rd. The actions are taking place in the context of the entry into force of the regime of exception, which since last March allows security forces to carry out arrests without warrants, among other irregularities. Social movements have denounced the use of security policy as a pretext to arbitrarily detain citizens and political opposition leaders, despite the government's assurance that people's rights are being respected. And Cuba hosts the 22nd Summit of Heads of State and Government of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America and People's Trade Treaty, ALBA TCP, to start on Wednesday, December 14th. The meeting will be an opportunity to honor the 18th anniversary of the creation of ALBA TCP and to exchange views on the progress and challenges of this coordination mechanism for the benefit of our nations. This political, economic, and social alliance is made up of 10 countries: Venezuela, Bolivia, Nicaragua, Dominica, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, Grenada, and Cuba. Let's take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other studies coming up, stay with us. On Tuesday, dismissed socialist Eva Kaili as vice president of the chamber for her alleged involvement in the corruption scheme. Eva Kaili was arrested in Belgium for her alleged involvement in the corruption scheme regarding the payment of bribes by Qatar to gain influence in political and economic decision-making in the European institution. The measure was backed by a large majority of members of parliament, with 625 votes in favor out of 628, 1 vote against and 2 abstentions. After the vice president's dismissal, the plenary will have to decide who will take over in a second plenary session. In the United Kingdom, the death toll rose to 7 after the explosion and crumbling of a building in the British Isles of Jersey. 2 more deaths have been confirmed, Jersey Police Chief Robin Smith said in a statement, adding that there are still residents missing. These victims have not yet been formally identified, and the officials said it could not be confirmed whether they are the same people reported missing. The tragedy occurred on Saturday around 4 p.m. local time in the island's capital, the port of St. Hilaire. The origin of the explosion is thought to be a gas leak, since hours earlier neighbors called the fire department to complain about the smell of gas. Much of the United Kingdom came to a halt on Tuesday as a result of widespread travel disruption caused by a combination of cold weather and strikes on the railways. Nurses also plan to take industrial action twice this month in a dispute over payments. Railway workers, who are part of the National Union of Rail, Maritime and Transport Workers Union, staged the first of 4 48-hour walkouts set to take place in December and January. Union members rejected a pay deal from railway companies, dashing hopes that the strikes will be called off. The strikes coincided with transport delays and cancellations due to ice and snow. Britain's National Weather Service issued severe weather alerts for large parts of the country. Roads in eastern and southeastern England were among the most affected. In Russia, the government warns that the United States economic initiative in the Asia-Pacific is of a conflictive nature. In his speech at the 13th Asian Conference of the Valdai International Discussion Club, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Andrei Rudenko detailed that Washington's initiative is aimed at weakening inclusive formats, such as the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC, and replacing it with the Indo-Pacific Strategy. Likewise, he denounced that all these strategies could unbalance the multilateralism still in force in East Asia. The situation's background is when President Joe Biden announced in May the launching of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework during a visit to Japan. Now we address other topics. On Tuesday, U.S. Geological Service Hawaiian Volcano Observatory, in a statement, said the 2 active volcanoes in Hawaii have stopped erupting. The alert levels for both volcanoes, the Mauna Loa and the Kilauea, were reduced from watch to advisory. The Kilauea volcano began erupting on September 2021 and destroyed more than 700 residences in 2018. Mauna Loa volcano began spewing molten rock on November 27th after being quiet for 38 years, setting some nerves in edge early on among people who have lived through destructive eruptions, but it didn't represent a threat to any communities. The observatory will continue monitoring the volcanoes for signs of renewed activity. This Tuesday, an Atlantic storm slammed into the Iberian Peninsula, leaving behind a trail of destruction, especially in Portugal. On Lisbon, the most affected city by the storm, houses and stores were flooded. The city roads were cut off, and trains, bus, and subways services were disrupted. Lisbon City Hall instructed residents to stay inside and told commuters to stay away from the city. Also, the commander of emergency services, José Carvalho, said Algés, located in the Lisbon area, was totally flooded by the rainwater and said that the work will begin soon on 2 drainage tunnels, which are expected to ease flooding.
The lower part of Algés was totally flooded due to heavy rainfall that occurred during the night. The accumulation was huge, causing the Algés stream overflow and flood the entire lower area of Algés.
And at least 100 people were killed and dozens injured in the Democratic Republic of the Congo due to heavy rains that hit the capital Kinshasa. According to official data, a total of 38,787 homes were flooded and at least 280 collapsed. The heavy rains also caused damage to the main road connecting the capital with the province of Congo Central. On the other hand, President Félix Tshisekedi expressed his condolences to the families of the victims and urged that water drainage works be accelerated to prevent the catastrophe from spreading. Now we move on to other topics. In Bolivia, health authorities confirmed the arrival of the sixth wave of COVID-19 in the country after the increase in cases. In a press conference, the Minister for Health, Jason Auza, informed that only 56% of the Bolivian population over 5 years old received the vaccine against COVID-19 since the beginning of the pandemic. The minister also stated that in order to control the pandemic in the country, it is necessary to attain an 80% coverage. Finally, the official highlighted that people who have received their dose against COVID more than 6 months ago can go to the national days to strengthen their immunization with the objective of cutting the chain of transmission. Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro said Tuesday that in the midst of the new wave of COVID-19 in the world, Venezuela has achieved a high level of protection for its population.
They were saying it in February, in March 2020, even in April. And the truth was that we faced the waves of the pandemic. We kept the pandemic at bay. We kept it under control. The public health system was put to the test, and the public health system responded accordingly to protect the life and the health of the people during the most dreadful pandemic that humanity has experienced over the last 100 years.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. China assures that the border situation with India is stable after New Delhi on Tuesday reported a clash on the border between troops of the two countries. At a press conference, the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Beijing, Wang Wenbin, said that the current situation on the border is solid and the Indian side is expected to work with China to jointly maintain peace. These statements come after the Indian Defense Minister Rajnath Singh claimed on Tuesday that the troops of both nations clashed last week at the border that separates them in Taiwan in the Himalayas. The Indian official also stressed that the Asian giant tried to unilaterally modify the status quo by invading the line of actual control and was obstructed by the Indian Army.
As far as we know, the current situation on the China-India border is generally stable. The two sides have maintained open communication on border-related issues through both diplomatic and military channels. We hope that the Indian side will work with China to move in the same direction, to follow seriously the important consensus reached by the leaders of the two countries. Strictly implement the spirit of the relevant agreement signed by the two sides and work with China to jointly maintain peace and tranquility of China-India border areas.
China on Tuesday advised its citizens in Afghanistan to leave the country as soon as possible, following a coordinated attack by the Islamic State group the previous day on a Chinese-owned hotel in the heart of Kabul.
Terrorist attack is egregious in nature and China is deeply shocked. We firmly oppose all forms of terrorism, strongly condemn the terrorist attack, express our condolence to the Afghan military police officers who were killed, and express our sympathy to the injured. After the incident, the Chinese embassy in Afghanistan has made serious representations to the Afghan interim government, asking the Afghan side to make every effort to search and rescue Chinese personnel, conduct to a thorough investigation, severely punish the perpetrators, and effectively strengthen the protection of security and safety of Chinese citizens and institutions in Afghanistan.
In Palestine, Israeli occupation forces demolished on Tuesday 4 Palestinian-owned homes in Al-Jiftlik, in the village north of the ancient city of Jericho. The Israeli authorities demolished the houses under the pretext that they were built in Area Z of the occupied West Bank, which is under full Israeli military rule. The head of the village council, Ahmad Abu Ghanem, told Wafa that soldiers, accompanied by a bulldozer, broke into the village and proceeded to demolish 4 houses, each of them between 120 and 150 square meters in size. All 4 houses were inhabited, he said, meaning that several families will be left homeless. On Tuesday, South Africa's parliament ruled on a report that the country's president, Cyril Ramaphosa, may have committed serious violations of the law. However, the head of state will not face impeachment as the report failed to receive enough votes. An ad hoc panel recently concluded that Ramaphosa may have committed serious legal violations, as well as misconduct in connection with a theft of money from his property. The event was the discovery of some $580,000 hidden in furniture at the president's Fala Fala farm. The panel found that the president may have committed a serious violations of the Constitution, while Ramaphosa has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing in the matter. During a special sitting of the National Assembly earlier on Tuesday, 214 members voted against the report, while 148 supported its adoption and another 2 abstained. And just as the hearts of millions of fans live the emotions of the Qatar 2022 World Cup, TeleSUR joins this sporting event with From the Field, a show that brings news, analysis, reviews, and more to our audience. Don't miss it. Our show airs 1 p.m. local time in Caracas and 12 p.m. New York. Remember, From the Field, only on TeleSUR. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.